A warm welcome to all of you. Thank you for making the time to join us in this annual day oration. This oration series is something that we began last year, and the idea of this oration is to be able to have with us somebody who has made a journey in public health in one way or another for much longer than us, so that we can share in their wisdom. And the orator for this year, Dr. Ravi Narayan, is not new to anyone in public health circles. So Dr. Ravi explores a journey of nearly 5 decades, which all started with the stimulus of a refugee camp experience for him as a medical intern in the early 70s, in 1971. Following that, he has been in academia, research, and field practice in public health and community medicine at the St. John's Medical College, which, as we all know, is quite a community-oriented medical college in South India. This explorative journey started as a lifelong quest, and I believe he was first challenged by this concept of, would you become a tap turner off or a floor mopper in public health as a young postgraduate at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine in 1973. So Dr. Ravi had the unique opportunity of being associated with the London School on one hand, while being able to spend his stint at the school in Bangalore as the Ross Institute of Occupational Health, at the Ross Institute of Occupational Health, which he led at St. John's. In the 80s and since the 80s, in fact, Ravi has been associated with a variety of research organizations, social movements, loose networks, better well-lit networks, a variety of them, to name a few: People's Health Movement, Jan Swasthya Abhiyan, the IPHU, CHESS, Drug Action Forum Karnataka, and very many of them. I will not also read out the long list of various policy level bodies that Ravi has been able to influence in course of his long career. In all these years, Ravi has consistently promoted a community health paradigm shift from what has been called a biomedical and techno-managerial process into a more social or community-oriented model. And Ravi, as you know, this kind of a shift is something that many of us in IPH hold as being very important if India has to transform its healthcare realities. So along with colleagues in India and abroad, he has managed to get mainstream to slowly accept these frameworks of action and analysis, some of which he will share in today's oration. The Masters in Public Health Honours Program at the Rajiv Gandhi Institute of Public Health, which has been running for a few years now, has benefited a lot from the experience of Sochara, as well as the wisdom and knowledge that Ravi brought into it. So he feels that teaching professionals to become tap turners off rather than floor moppers may now be possible. So with this introduction, I hand over the floor to Ravi. Thank you again for accepting this permission.
Friends, I'm very happy to be here. So today what I'm going to quickly try and share with you is just a few facets of this very strange journey from medicine to public health, then from public health to preventive and social medicine, then from preventive and social medicine to community medicine. These are departments that I was part of. Then to community health, to people's health, and then rediscovering that all of this is really a new public health. So I'm going to quickly run through this journey, and then halfway through the oration, I'm going to switch to say, are there some ideas or some issues that I'd just like to present to you, not as gospel truth or anything like that, but just as ideas that you can mull over, we can discuss it in future, and maybe this will help us to reach health for all, and move the paradigm slightly differently. Now, what happened was, the inspiration was by accident in 1971. Don't ask me, life is full of accidents, and some of these accidents can be very, very positive. The Bangalore University decided that if any young intern from a medical college went to the East Pakistan refugee camps as you know, 9 million refugees, one of the world's largest exodus and genocide in history, walked across a 1,500-mile border in 1971, and there were 1,000 camps set up by the government of India. Unlike the present Rohingya and other crises, the Indian government had no such hesitation. 9 million people were welcomed. They were kept in 1,000 camps. And at the time of the war in December, once the war got over and Bangladesh came out of East Pakistan, these 9 million walked back. Most of them at least went back. And I went and spent 3 months of my public health posting in this. And that really changed my life. So very strangely, I've since then, till every South Asian crisis, Sochara and St. John's and wherever I have worked with, we've always sent young people to a disaster. Because I'm a great believer that going and working in a community in a disaster will change your life. And, and all of us in Sochara are disaster victims in the sense, most of us are either cyclone, Thelma's Andhra Pradesh cyclone, Shirdi, and so I don't want to go into details, but I think it's very important. Now, in this meeting, the other chance meeting was I met a German doctor who would also come along to this international collaboration at that time. And just before I finished this 3 months, which was one of the most interesting here, that's me in the first slide. And then I learned a lot of things from the people of Bangladesh, from the East Pakistan refugees, because, they were refugees and all of them had brought, I always show this photograph of umbrellas because I ask people, what do you think the refugees brought with them? And many of you don't know that 9 million people walked across with 9 million umbrellas. Because umbrellas in Bangladesh is not for rain. It's self-defense, it's a shopping bag, it's all sorts of things. So when you leave the house, you take your umbrella with you and it doesn't matter whether it's raining or not outside. So they all brought, that was the only thing not given by the world solidarity. We had all sorts of things, but it was very interesting. And this little hospital that we built with the help of the local refugees, this is the first little hospital I've ever built and worked in. It's a little dispensary. And inside you find everything with cane and bamboo, including all our drip stands and everything. And it's been a really wonderful experience of working with the community. And because they were refugees, we had to do everything ourselves. Till today, I remember when we went and met the army commander, there were 3 of us interns. We decided then, like all young interns, we went and said, who's the senior doctor we are going to, report to? He said, see, I didn't ask for senior, junior, and I asked for doctors. They said 3, I was very happy. Now, if you are not, you can't sign a death certificate on together with all interns, just think of yourself as one doctor, one full doctor. And so we ran this center. We did all sorts of things, including deliveries and all sorts of things. With this little center there that you see there, that's our little hospital. And it was quite an interesting experience. Now, why I say that was at this time, I met this doctor who gave me this little book from Makerere in Africa. They had just finished a symposium based on a lot of young doctors who had worked in Africa. And it was called Medical Care in Developing Countries, a symposium from Makerere. And I suggest to all people that you must get a copy of this and read it, because what it said is that the axiom that you have to think of a medicine of poverty, medicine of limited resources, that even though we might talk about health for all now, it's not going to all be, Columbia Asias and Narayan Hridayalayas and so on. We're always going to have, a resource constraint, even with the highest technologies. And this book really gave me that idea. It said that, and should work on appropriate technology. And there were such interesting things, how to do anesthesia in a mission, in a camp, how to do deliveries. So this book was so interesting. I never, even heard of such things in a medical college, because we, with all the paraphernalia and so on, and we were a very good college. The idea that you could do all this sitting in if you go to my blog, narayanblog@blogspot.com, you can see other photographs, including me with other nurses and doctors sitting on the floor doing many things we had not been taught to. So this was, in a way, my first community experience. Okay. Now, when I came back, I actually wrote a very strong article. I wrote as a young intern, and very strangely, the Indian Journal of Medical Education, which was a journal of the Indian Association for the Advancement of Medical Education, started an interns seminar. And I wrote a very angry, no, I wouldn't say angry, but I just wrote a very important paper called Medical Education Relevant to the Needs of Society, a student's point of view. And quite by accident, and again a second accident, it got quoted in the Parkes textbook of preventive and social medicine. I then decided to do public health. And again, quite by accident, London School of Hygiene and St. John's Medical College had a meeting, nothing to do with me. They decided to work together. And London School decided to set up something called the Ross Institute Unit of Occupational Health, which was going to be a unit of occupational health working with tea plantations in South India and agricultural occupations. And St. John's would be like a partnership. And I went to London School to do my fellowship, public health, industrial health as training. And I was then going to come back both as an overseas staff of the London School and a staff of St. John's Medical College. Now, this is where the subject of today's oration came up. In a guest lecture, Professor Dennis Burkitt, who many of you, especially those of you who are doctors, might know as Burkitt's lymphoma, did a lot of work in Africa, linked a particular lymphoma to mosquitoes and so on. He had just come and become the head of the Medical Research Council of UK. And in a guest lecture, which a lot of students often, miss, and I happened to go there, he showed me this slide. Since then, I've shown this slide in every lecture I've given all over the country, all over the world, because to me, that really hit me hard. He showed this photograph, and I often, in my storytelling sessions, say, if you walk into this room and there was a sink here and the tap was open and the sink was blocked, what would you do? Commonsensically. And everybody, right, for the last 50 years have told me that they'd either close the tap, and then I said, what next? They'll say, unblock the sink, and then they will floor mop because it'll be a mess. But when you actually think of it, what are we doctors doing? What are we public health doing? We are mostly floor mopping. Because the determinants of the illnesses that we are seeing, and because we know health is supposed to be physical, mental, social well-being. Amen. That's the first lecture and only lecture. After that, the whole of medical college, nursing college, dental college, Ayush colleges is all about ill-being, not about well-being. So what happened to health? And if you're talking about well-being, then where does the doctor, the nurse, the dentist, the white coat, the stethoscope, the drug, or the hospital come in? None at all. I now go class after class, school after school, college after college, and start talking about health. And I can assure you, we never talk about doctors, nurses, drugs, hospitals, or disease. Because health has very little to do with it. So this was really something that hit me, that if you want to be a floor mopper and keep mopping the ill health that comes because people are not taking care of their health at family level, individual level, or at societal level, you can be a floor mopper for life. He also shared another one, which is equally good because he was a researcher and he's head of research, that if you want to be a floor mopper, then you will do molecular biology, intracellular research. But if you want to be a tap turner off, then you will get into a balloon and fly over the community, the society, the country, whatever. And in a very strange sort of way, the guest lecturer was saying that if you want to really tackle health, you need epidemiology, not molecular biology. It wasn't either or, but if you have a drug or a vaccine, ultimately the results of molecular biology, you can still floor mop a problem. If you really want to tackle the societal, the structural issue, then you have to move to socio-epidemiology and epidemiology, which I'll build up. Now, this didn't strike me at that time, but it somehow seemed something moved inside me, and I came back. Before that, of course, I had also had other meetings with David Morley. He just come back from Africa, which is under 5 clinics and wrote to health charts. Joshua Horn, who came back, a surgeon from US who went to join Mao's Red Revolution and did a lot of work. And the Barefoot Doctor's Manual had just come back. So these were additional inspirations during my public health career. And I came back to St. John's and started a 10-year teaching career. In between, I went to All India Institute of Medical Sciences because I had to do an MD community medicine. But there were two things that really saved me that 2 years. One was there was a fantastic project called Ballabgarh in which we were put as medical officers in a little village called Chhasa. So for 6 months, I really, out of the 2 years MD, 6 months was sitting in a small village in Haryana, really doing primary healthcare work. That was one. And the second one was I met a lot of people outside of All India Institute, and that was JNU. I have great regard for Dr. Banerjee and everyone of his team, because I met him and JNU and the Center for Social Medicine and Community Health, which is just starting up. So, and of course, the Medico Friends Circle. So for me, when I think of the All India Institute MD in Community Medicine, I think of the emergency, which was a fantastic experience, and getting involved, the JNU link, and the links with Chasa village and so on. But anyway, I came back, and what I tried to do was try to understand what tap turning off and what balloonist approach was. And we started 6 centers. So in this 10 years, it's a very interesting phase. 6 rural centers we started, one of which was India's first health cooperative, Mallur Health Cooperative. I'll say a little bit about that. And so that was my first experience of moving from public health in a way to primary health care, and saying that whether it's public health or community health, you got to really start at the community level. And this was a wonderful experience we got in a village. So Mallur Health Cooperative was where I first started, and that was a health function added to a dairy cooperative. I just won't say too much. 40 miles from here, we started a very interesting project. Many people don't know about it, though ICMR has written a lot about it. And it was that basically we added a 3 paisa cess per liter of milk, and we ran a health center. We took the idea from Amul Dairy. Amul was cooperativizing milk, but they never had health services. And we added a health function here. And health functions added with this health cess. There was a village health committee, Mahila Mandal, local trained health workers, home-based under 5 clinics, and etc., etc. What is important to understand was this was in 1974, 4 years before Almata. And in 1976, 2 years after we started Mallur, ICMR called this meeting called Alternative Approaches to Healthcare. Was there an alternative approach to the PHC pattern, the primary health center, which we adopted from, and they decided there were 14 projects in the country, one of which was Mallur. And in that, these 14 projects gave these ideas. So most public health researchers in India, I think from now, we are lost. Most of you have not seen these books. This is the Indian experience we're talking about. How many of you have seen this ICMR monograph? I mean, these are the first 14 primary healthcare projects in India, one of which Jamkhed made it to the Almata, collection of Kenneth Newell and so on. And one of those was the local health cooperative. My professor from St. John's went and presented a paper there on this cooperative. He showed that it's possible to involve people in decision making in health programs. And if they are paying for it, local resources, then local leadership and so on becomes very, very important. When you talk about community participation, you're often talking about in a passive way that they're participating in a program that you run or that you offer. But here was a very interesting idea. What was interesting was in 1980, 4 years later, now inspired by Almata, ICMR called all these 14 projects together. And 14 more had been identified by then. So there were 28 primary healthcare projects that reported to ICMR with evaluation against primary health centers. Now that is what you can do in a medical college. The department had moved from public health to preventive and social medicine. Now it was called community medicine. But that was not enough. In 1977, just before the Almata, the Janata Rural Health Philosophy, and I want to detail, produced a green manual. How many of you have seen this manual? A Janata manual in India on community health workers quoted this Chinese poem, that if you're wanting to do community medicine, community health, or public health, go to the people, live among them, learn from them, love them, start with what they know, build on what they have. And so this really inspired me. The first inspiration was the floor mopper tap turning off. And then I got the feeling when I was going to become associate professor and so on slowly, this kept worrying me. Are we going to the people? Are we living with them? Are we learning from them? Loving them is different, but learning from them, which means really giving their context, their understanding. Are we starting our programs of primary healthcare or public health is what they know? and building on what they have? Or are they always floor mopping with solutions from elsewhere? And so this really worried us, and it worried many of us. We used to discuss this very often. And so in St. John's, we started a CHW course. Many of you don't know, we started in 78, just before, a few months before Alma Ata, our own version of the Janta course. We trained anybody, the only person who could come was somebody who hadn't been a doctor or a nurse or a dentist. Because we said, you are trained in medicine. So you have certain distorted ideas. You can't be a health worker, but if you're a teacher, a social worker, a community worker, and initially we did it with the mission health, because one of the advantages in mission health is you have the vow of obedience. So if your experiment doesn't work, you can stop people from setting up practice or doing their own thing. So we started with training community health workers, and later we trained in the link workers in plantations. So community health workers, ASHAs that we now talk about, we trained in 1978 before Alma Ata. So in many ways, when the Alma Ata declaration came, for many of us, it was an endorsement. Many of us in medical college had the feeling that some of our medical college colleagues thought there was that we'd much better off as patients in NIMHANS rather than wanting to go and run cooperatives and get involved with Dalit issues and all this sort of thing. But then we now had formal ways by which we could address. We were working on health for all. We were working on primary health care. We were working on health as a fundamental human right. We were working on equity. We were working on appropriate technology. We were intersectoral development and so on. So that's how it all started. We continued in St. John's, but in 83, 10 years later, a group of us in St. John's, 5 of us to begin with, began to feel that we cannot practice community health if we wanted to be tap turners off, because in a medical college, you can only be a floor mop. You can only see anemia in women, but you can't see the gender issue. You can only see sanitation as open defecation, but you can't see sanitation as a Paura Karmika problem. You can't see sanitation as a gender issue and what it does and what are choices. So when you are stuck in a medical college, you can only see it as anemia, HIV, AIDS, malaria, TB. You can't get deeper. And so a group of us, in a spirit of whatever you'd like to call it, left St. John's. We walked out of, we given a resignation letter which said we are moving out of the medical college wall because we wanted to be part of a health movement. That's all. We were not fighting. We were not upset. Okay, more salary. We just moved out. And then we went, and over 2 years, we wrote this definition of community health. What is community health? If I am now the Society for Community Health Awareness, Research and Action Committee, what do I do? So we wrote this definition, which was community health is a process of enabling people to exercise collectively their responsibility to their own health and to demand health as their right. And community health approach, therefore, would mean increasing the individual, the family, and the community's autonomy over health and over the organizations, the means, the opportunities, etc. No place for doctors, no place for drugs, no place for hospitals, no place for, and it's not as if we're all, many of us are doctors, so it's not that we're not against medicine or we're not anti-doctors. But if you're talking about health, if you're talking about communities' health, then this definition helped us keep the professionals out, the top-down models out, and said, no, we're going to build from him. Now, what did we do? Now, this was not, I must say that we had 3 provocations over a period of time. The first was, you'll be surprised with this provocation. How many of you have seen this book? ICMR and ICSR got together after Health for All and wrote a book. So after that, you don't have to talk about Marx or Mao or Gandhi or Ambedkar. We just have to talk about what ICMR and ICSSR are telling us in a Health for All book. How many of you know this, that their prescription, and that's what you people are beginning to do in IPH, is reduce poverty, inequality, and spread education, organize poor and underprivileged to fight for their basic rights, move away from counterproductive Western models, provide community health volunteers. Mind you, this is ICMR, ICSR, not the Jan Swasthya Abhiyan. Okay. Similarly, Dr. Banerjee said a socio-cultural process, a political process, and so on. And it went on like this. He was the first one to say that health is a socio-cultural process, a political process, technological process. Later, Thelma went and did her epidemiology in London School. And there, Jeffrey Rose was teaching that the primary determinants of disease is economic and social, and therefore remedies must be economic and social. And so all this influenced us, and we began to work. Now, what did we do? Let me quickly come to that because I'm running out of time. We tried to understand the social determinants. So what did we do? For nearly 10, 15 years, we tried to go beyond the clinical, the epidemiological, and the techno-managerial issues and try and understand deeper social, economic, cultural, political structure. What did we do? Once you understand the deeper dimension, then the focus of action will not be disease or ill health. It will be poverty, gender, conflict, stigma, social exclusion. So then we started women's health. That's why we met Mahila Samakhya and Amruta knows. That was one of the things. We explored women's health in this way. We explored tobacco addiction. We explored street children's health. We explored alcohol addiction in action. We explored environmental health. We explored vector-borne diseases. So these were the 6 or 7 things that we worked on. And after a few years, Dr. Thelma went to London School and did a very well-known PhD thesis called, it's often seen as TB, but it's not TB, it's researching levels of analysis and solutions. And this was her thesis, which helped us go further. It said that the way you understand health, that is the way you will respond to it. So if you have surface phenomena, infectious disease, germ theory, then in TB, you will only be looking at BCG case finding domiciliary. If you look at immediate causes, which is undernutrition, low resistance, we are reaching there, we'll start looking at development and welfare. If you look at deeper symptoms of inequitable relations of society, you'll start talking about land reform, social movements. So her contribution in her thesis was only to say that these are not either or. It's not capitalism versus socialism. It's just that how do you understand the problem? And as you understand the deeper dimensions, you will add action on the deeper dimensions. This is not either or. Okay. She also discovered something called globalization during her thesis in the 20s. Till then, all of us in public health knew global health. UNICEF, WHO, Rockefeller Foundation, now Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. We are talking about globalization and health, which is corporate-led globalization, neoliberal economic policies, and how it affects livelihoods, incomes, food, war, water, healthcare. So this was something very important. And that is how we felt that whereas one group of us in Sochara should be working on the community, trying to understand social determinants, move towards action, organizing women, organizing street kids, organizing so on, and not as an either or, working with public health people working. Another group should start working on a countervailing path, which is bringing peoples together. And that's how the People's Health Movement started. We wrote a whole lot of books. And finally, we produced the People's Health Charter called Health is a Social, Economic and Political Issue, and above all, a fundamental human rights. Much before the WHO Commission on Social Determinants, this is the first international document which talks about social determinants. Health has to be seen as inequality, poverty, exploitation, violence, and injustice. And we can have a chat on any illnesses and we can reach that level. And so this is how the movement started. We did a lot of health policy. Meanwhile, we tried to bring in any of them the social action. But I really want to come to something else. We created a learning program. What we said was, is it possible to think of public health and community health being together? One of the dilemmas we came, so we created our community health learning program, started from 2003. We've had 12 batches. I won't go into detail. All of that is there in a later conversation. But I just want to come to the dilemma. In this community health program, the difference between other programs is it's a community health orientation program. It's a foundation course, and 6 months of a 1-year program here and 1 year out of a 2-year program in Bhopal. That's in Hindi. This is in English and other languages. We have 6 months in the field and 6 months that's the sort of CHLP model. What was the dilemma? The dilemma of this was that there were now two things. Our work in public health and community health was creating demand and empowerment. You can say the movement model. And the other one was system development, which I know IPH is very deeply involved in, and that is important. But the dilemma was this, and I wanted to present this dilemma to you, that by 2000 AD, there were two groups in India and in many parts of the world. The mainstream group, who believed that public health was professional, it was biomedical and techno-managerial, it was all about global health and global solidarity. It was international public health, preventive and social medicine, and the publications that we need to read was the Lancet, the BMJ, the National Medical Journal, and those sort of things. There was another group called the activist group. They considered themselves as activists, they considered themselves as psychosocial, cultural, economic, political, ecological, all these other determinants were coming in. They looked at globalization not only as global health, but as globalization. They were very involved with communities and people, and they were writing in a different set of journals, Economic, Political Weekly, MFC Bulletin, and so on. Now, this was a real dilemma. We said, is it possible to bridge this gap? I decided in 2009 that this gap must be bridged. This idea that you have activists and that you have professionals is not a good idea. And the way to do that is we created a new terminology. If you are professional, then you must be an activist professional. And if you are activist, you must be a scholar activist. The idea was that you must be evidence-based, and evidence-based is not biomedical, techno-managerial evidence, but it means social, economic, political, cultural, and so on. And for the last, I don't have time to tell you about that, for the last time, I decided in Sochara to step off Sochara, and for the last 10 years, I have worked only with these groups here. Ministry of Health, Planning Commission, WHO headquarters, CRO, PHFI, etc., TIS, various schools, public health, BMJ, Lancet, and so on. What are the paradigms we have just talking about? And I want to just, bring that up. First, there's need for a paradigm shift. I'm going to do it in a hurry because I'm not really running out of time. And there is a difference between a biomedical techno-managerial model and a social community model, which is participatory. And in many of the work that we're all doing, we're getting there. As long as we don't see it as this versus that, but both are needed. The second we found, I won't detail, is that you need to have an SCPC analysis. And this was something that I presented to a group of epidemiologists, and I'm happy in Southeast Asia, they accepted it, that we have always been seeing a social model and a biomedical model as if this versus that. You can either be the JNU model or you can be the CMC Vellore model. Now, my feeling is that we need both together. We need the social SCPC analysis. We need the working with the community to do things like, so it's not drugs and vaccines are not necessary. What you call cleanliness is not latrines, but it's not, it has to be contextualized. So the context is now, this is the diagram that you have a public health challenge. You can put any of the challenges you have in IPH there. There's a biomedical determinant. There's a public health management system development, but there's a social, economic, political development. We then worked with the Dorabji Tata Trust and had a series of workshops, TB, malaria, diarrhea. These are books that you can check out. On each of them, there's been a seminar on what is SCPC analysis of these drugs. The idea was to try and even stop this biomedical versus socio-epidemiology, but to have that biomedical people begin to understand socio-epidemiology, and a lot of this was done, a lot of diarrhea did. We then came to communitization. What we were trying to say was not community participation, but that community must become part of the whole public health system. And we were really happy with some work that we did with NRHM, when finally NRHM, if you now word communitization, if you check, you will find communitization is a word used only in India in health policy circles, and it comes to NRHM and northeastern states. Institutionalizing community-led action for health by empowering community to take leadership in matters. I don't know how many of you know that there are 7 elements of communitization in NRHM. Many of you don't see it like that because you see them individually. The Village Health Committee, the ASHA, the involvement of local governments, community monitoring, Jan Sunwais and Jan Samvad, untied funds, and so on. Finally, a group of us got together, tried to bridge this gap and created the idea of a social vaccine. 5 of us from 5 different continents wrote an article, took a long time before peer reviews agreed. And finally, we said that just as you handle, people were very worried that we are biomedicalizing social, but we said, no, it doesn't matter. we are trying to understand that just as you have the idea of a vaccine, that you can prevent it by changing attitudes, changing beliefs in society. And finally, the importance of values, because we discovered that certain values have to be, whether you're public system, private system, everybody's talking about PPP, and so on, and that's not helping. So we said, let's identify the values, and we started this. So I would like to end, last one, and I've run out of time, was revisiting pluralism. One of the biggest blind spots is we had one plural manual in India in 1977. Unfortunately, when the Congress came to power, I'm nothing against Janata Congress, I'm not talking about that. The medical establishment in Delhi republished this green book. So none of you have seen the green book. You've all seen the yellow book, Health Workers, which the 6 chapters on Ayurveda, Yoga, Unani Siddha, Homeopathy, Naturopathy, and medicinal plants have been removed. So the health worker manuals of India since 1978 are now back to, biomedical, allopathic dominance. And so this is what has happened. We worked a lot with this group and bringing indigenous people, so on. Most recently, a national network of indigenous healers has joined the movement, the Ayush and public health. So I'm not getting into details. We have had Deva and others be part of a committee. And so we've worked. So I'm going to just say that these are some of the ideas which we are bringing from trying to bridge the gap. And countervailing part is the last thing I want to say, that I believe that when we work as a group towards policy, then we can really change things. And the 2 of the best examples, I've just finished writing in the Oxford Encyclopedia of Global Public Health Research, the thing about how WHO came back to primary health care and came back to social determinants through the pressure of the public health, of the people's health movement and so on. Now, having said this, I just want to say that this is not new. Much of what I'm saying might sound like as if it's some work of Sochara or MFC or JSA. It is now being written about all over the world, except in India. Because in India, somehow, a group of us are considered NGOs or civil society and public health researchers, and we're talking about all this. Abroad, it is here, from Berkeley, from UK, from Sweden, from Australia, everywhere, the new paradigms, the health movement paradigm, the right to health movements are being talked about. Luckily, from 2005, and I want to end with this, I'm sorry, I'm asking 5 more minutes. I'm going to end with it. There are 5 documents that have come out in WHO CRO, and I'm talking about formal mainstream documents, not documents produced by Sochara or IPH or anybody like that. The first is this Southeast Asia Public Health Initiative. How many of you have seen that, since you're all South Asian researchers? It says that there are many alternative institutions, both organized and informal, that have been active, involved in public health work. Had this been more recently, they would have included IPH. In a WHO CRO document, they're saying VHI, PHM, Sochara, and Sehat, etc. are groups that are strong public health resources. And what I'd like you to read is the last thing in green. They say, unless the national apex institutions or schools of public health, everybody here also dreaming of a school of public health, must recognize this alternative sector as strong resources and involve them in training and research. Otherwise, a large portion of creative energy in public health will remain untapped. Do many of you know, this is what I wanted to come and have a chat with you guys in IPH. That the WHO CRO has said that you have to be recognized because you are an alternative sector. You understand? You're not a university, college, or whatever. And unless these national and their research, so that is the first one. The second one is in 2009, WHO CRO brought these are all the epidemiologists meeting regularly, Mahidol and BRAC and all the people in this region. They are saying the scope and reach of epidemiology is an integral part of public health must be expanded to study social, cultural, economic, political, ecological determinants. Don't ask who's the culprit behind it, but they are saying that SEPC analysis is at the forefront of epidemiology in the Southeast Asia region. So if you people are arriving at that, please think you are in the forefront of this thinking. This is WHO CRO. We're not talking about People's Health Movement or Jan Swasthya Abhiyan. They invited me to give a keynote, and so I went and put all my favorite ideas in there, which I won't go into details, in that social epidemiology book. But what was nice was they had a Delhi declaration which says all rational evidence-based health action must address socio-cultural sensitivity, equity in health with social justice. So all the words that we are talking about is getting into that. Finally, the Indian Public Health Association, believe it or not, organized a meeting of 16 of us from different backgrounds, which included Sochara, JNU, CMC, Vellore, and others. So it's not as if Indian Public Health Association is like all close to that. And we had a meeting where we decided, since there are, I don't know how many of you know how many courses there are. I don't know, because every week one new MPH is starting in the country. But I think the last count was 46. There are 46 MPH courses which are now in the country. And so IPH said we must have some core competencies. So there's been a whole exercise, which many of you may not be aware of. We said there are 16 core competencies and 8 cross-cutting competencies. And all those are in red, which is what I've just finished telling all of you. Critical analysis and systems thinking, economics, medical anthropology, political economy, lifelong learning, equity, gender, social determinants and health rights, governance and decentralization, conflict resolution. So if any of you think, alternative is not mainstream, we are not there. And that is why I'd like to end by saying what we finally did. 3 years ago, by stroke of luck, the Rajiv Gandhi University of Health Sciences decided to set up the Rajiv Gandhi Institute of Public Health. And with being the first and only autonomous school of public health, though they're planning it very badly, they decided to have an MPH course and said we can't be, at that time they were the 24th MPH course in the country. So we must do something separate and different. And we put in our little 2 bits saying that if you add the MPH 2 years and the CHLP, the Community Learning Program of Sochara, you get a very lovely alternative and mainstream model. And it's not against any other model. It's just that public health in India or public health in Southeast Asia can take ideas from other models, but it can't be those models transplanted. So my main subject today is that if you really want to turn off the tap of ill health in this country, we have to start thinking of new paradigms. And I hope some of these we can do together. Thanks a lot.